The boarding house smelled like boiled cabbage and disappointment. Mara Bell sat at the corner table, the one with the wobbly leg that nobody else wanted, picking at a bowl of thin soup that had more water than substance. Around her, the other girls chattered and laughed, their voices blending into a noise she'd learned to tune out years ago. "Did you see Margaret's new dress?" one of them was saying. "Her gentleman caller bought it for her. Says he's going to propose by spring." "Spring? That's ages away. If I were Margaret, I'd have that ring by Christmas." Laughter erupted. Mara kept her eyes on her soup. She was used to being invisible. At 23, she'd perfected the art of occupying space without being noticed. It was easier that way, less painful. "Mara?" The voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Mrs. Hutchins, the boarding house matron, stood in the doorway. She was a tall woman, thin as a winter branch, with eyes that never held warmth. Mara's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Yes, ma'am?" "My office." "Now." The chatter died. All eyes turned to Mara. She felt heat creep up her neck, that familiar burn of unwanted attention. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her spoon and stood. The chair scraped against the floor. Too loud, always too loud when she moved. She followed Mrs. Hutchins down the narrow hallway, her footsteps heavy on the worn floorboards. The other girl's whispers started before she was even out of earshot. "What did she do now?" "Probably broke something. You know how clumsy—" The office door closed, cutting off the rest. Mrs. Hutchins didn't sit. She stood behind her desk, arms crossed, and studied Mara the way someone might study a piece of furniture they were considering throwing out. "There's a position," she said finally. "Up in the mountains. Ranch work." Mara blinked. "Ranch work?" "Caleb Thornidge is looking for help. Room and board provided. Wages to be discussed." The name meant nothing to Mara, but something in Mrs. Hutchins' expression made her stomach tighten. I don't know anything about ranch work, ma'am." "That's not my concern." Mrs. Hutchins picked up a piece of paper from her desk, glanced at it, then set it back down. "You're 3 months behind on your rent. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." Mara's throat went dry. "I've been looking for work. The bakery said no. The dress shop said no. The hotel said no." Mrs. Hutchins' voice was flat, reciting facts. "No one in this town is going to hire you, girl. You're too slow, too quiet, and frankly, too much of a distraction." The words hit like physical blows, but Mara had heard worse. She swallowed hard. "I can—" The stutter came when she was nervous, turning her tongue clumsy. "I can keep trying. This is your option. Take the ranch job or find somewhere else to live." Silence filled the room. Outside, Mara could hear the wind picking up, rattling the window panes. Winter was coming early this year. Everyone said so. "When would I start?" Her voice came out small. "Tomorrow. You'll take the morning supply wagon up the mountain road. Thornidge will be expecting you." Mara wanted to ask questions. What kind of work? What was the ranch like? Who was this Thornidge man? But she already knew the answers didn't matter. She needed a roof over her head. She needed to eat. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Hutchins nodded once, dismissive. "Pack your things tonight. And Mara—" She paused, something almost like pity flickering across her face before it hardened again. "Don't embarrass this house more than you already have." Back in the dormitory room she shared with 5 other girls, Mara pulled her canvas bag from under her bed and began folding her few possessions. 3 dresses, all worn, 2 pairs of stockings with darned holes, a hairbrush missing half its bristles, a book she'd read so many times the pages were soft as cloth. "You're really going?" Mara looked up. Ruth stood in the doorway, arms full of clean linens. Of all the girls in the boarding house, Ruth was the closest thing Mara had to a friend, which wasn't saying much. Ruth didn't mock her openly, at least. "Don't have much choice." Ruth set down the linens and came closer, lowering her voice. "Mara, you don't understand. Thornidge Ranch. People talk about that place. Caleb Thornidge is—" She hesitated. "He's not right. Violent temper. Dangerous. 3 men have worked for him in the past 2 years. None of them lasted more than a week." "What happened to them?" "Ran off. One of them came back to town with his arm in a sling, wouldn't say what happened. Just kept saying, 'That mountain will kill you.'" Mara folded another dress, her movement slow and deliberate. "Mrs. Hutchins is kicking me out if I don't go." Then find somewhere else. There are other boarding houses, other towns. With what money? Mara's voice came out sharper than she intended. Ruth, I don't have anything. No family, no savings, no skills anyone wants. This is the only offer I'm going to get. Ruth's face softened with something that might have been sympathy or might have been relief that she wasn't the one being sent away. I'm sorry, Ruth said quietly. Mara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. That night she didn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed listening to the other girls breathe and shift in their sleep and tried not to think about what morning would bring. The supply wagon left at dawn. Mara climbed up beside the driver, a grizzled man named Jack who didn't waste words. He barely glanced at her as she settled onto the bench, her bag clutched in her lap. Red Hollow was just waking up as they rolled through the main street. Shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, a dog barking somewhere. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the same bakery that had turned her away. Then the town fell behind them, and the mountain road began. It wasn't really a road, more like a suggestion of where wheels had gone before, carved into the hillside, climbing steadily upward. On one side, the mountain rose steep and rocky. On the other, a drop-off that made Mara's stomach clench. Jack kept the horses to a steady pace, navigating the switchbacks with practiced ease. He didn't speak, and Mara didn't try to fill the silence. She watched the landscape change as they climbed. The trees grew thicker, darker. The air turned colder. The wind had teeth up here. 2 hours in, Jack finally spoke. You know what you're getting into? Mara looked at him. His face was weathered like old leather, his eyes focused on the road. I need work, she said simply. That ain't what I asked. She didn't have an answer for that. Jack was quiet for another mile, then, Thornidge ain't like other men. Mountains made him hard, made him mean. You cross him, he won't think twice about... He stopped himself. Just keep your head down. Do the work. Don't expect kindness. I don't. He glanced at her then, really looked at her for the first time. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. You might be tougher than you look, he said, almost to himself. Mara didn't respond. She'd heard every variation of that sentiment her whole life. You're stronger than you think. Don't let them get to you. You'll show them. Words were cheap. Words didn't pay rent or fill your stomach. The wagon climbed higher. Holcomb. Thornidge Ranch appeared suddenly, around a bend in the road where the trees thinned out. It wasn't what Mara expected. The main house was solid, built from mountain stone and rough-hewn timber, 2 stories with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. But everything else, the barn, the outbuildings, the fences, looked like they'd been fighting a losing battle with the weather for years. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. Sections of fence were patched with mismatched wood. Tools lay scattered in the yard, some rusting, some half buried in mud. It wasn't abandoned, exactly, but it had the feel of a place where only one person was trying to hold everything together, and that one person was losing. Jack pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. This is as far as I go. He started unloading supplies, flour sacks, crates of goods, bundles wrapped in canvas. Mara climbed down, her legs stiff from the long ride. She stood in the yard holding her bag, unsure what to do next. That's when she saw him. Caleb Thornidge emerged from the barn, and Mara's first thought was that he looked exactly like someone who'd choose to live alone on a mountain. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of deliberate economy that came from constant physical work. His dark hair was too long, his beard untrimmed. His clothes were practical, worn canvas pants, a heavy shirt, boots caked with mud. But it was his eyes that made her stomach drop. Cold, assessing. The eyes of someone who had long ago stopped expecting anything good from other people. He looked at her the way you'd look at a tool you suspected was broken. Jack dumped the last crate and climbed back onto the wagon without ceremony. Good luck, he muttered, not quite meeting Mara's eyes. And then he was turning the horses around, already leaving. Mara wanted to call him back, wanted to climb back onto that wagon and take her chances in town. But the wagon was already disappearing around the bend. She turned back to face Caleb Thornidge. He was still standing there, maybe 20 feet away, just watching her. Not coming closer, not speaking. The wind cut across the yard, cold enough to sting. Finally, he moved. walked toward her with long strides, stopped a few feet away. Up close, he was bigger than she'd thought. Intimidating in the way a boulder was intimidating. Solid, immovable, potentially dangerous. "You're the help." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "Yes, sir. Maribel." His eyes swept over her, head to toe, and she knew exactly what he was seeing. A fat girl. A soft girl. Someone who had no business on a working ranch. "You ever done ranch work before?" "No, sir." "Ever done any physical work?" She swallowed. "I'm a hard worker." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite amusement, not quite contempt. "That right?" It wasn't a question. He turned and started walking toward the barn. After a few steps, he looked back. "You coming, or you just planning to stand there?" Mara hurried to follow, her bag banging against her leg. The barn was worse inside than out. Stalls that needed mucking, hay bales stacked haphazardly, tools everywhere and nowhere, the smell of animals and old wood and neglect. Caleb stopped in the middle of it, turned to face her. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said. "I don't need help. I don't want help. The town keeps sending people up here thinking I can't handle my own place, and every single one of them has been useless. You'll probably be the same." Mara felt something twist in her chest. Not hurt, she was too used to dismissal for that, but something else, something harder. "Then why did you agree to take me on?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because the town won't stop bothering me until I do. So here's how this works. You get room and board. Small wage if you last the month. You do what I tell you, when I tell you. You keep up or you leave. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a babysitter, and I sure as hell am not interested in making this easy for you." "I understand. Do you?" He stepped closer, and Mara had to resist the urge to step back. "The work is hard. The conditions are hard. The weather is hard. Everything about this place is designed to break people. I've seen men twice your size quit after 3 days." "I won't quit. Everyone says that." "I mean it." He laughed then, a short, harsh sound without humor. "We'll see." He turned away, started toward the barn door. "Your room's in the main house, second floor, first door on the right. Get settled. You start at dawn tomorrow." "What time is dawn?" He looked back at her, and for the first time, something almost like interest crossed his face. "When you see light," he said. "Don't make me come find you." The room was small. A bed, a chair, a table with a basin and pitcher. A window that looked out over the yard and beyond, to where the mountains rose up, dark and endless. Mara set her bag on the bed and sat down heavily. The mattress was thin but clean. Better than what she'd had at the boarding house. She should have been relieved. She had a roof. She had a job. Instead, she felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down on her. "You do what I tell you, when I tell you. You keep up or you leave." She looked at her hands. Soft hands. Hands that had washed dishes and swept floors and folded laundry, but never held a pitchfork or repaired a fence or hauled hay bales. What was she doing here? The answer came quickly, bitter and familiar. Surviving. Same as always. She stood up, moved to the window. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful in a harsh, indifferent way. Down in the yard, she could see Caleb working, carrying something heavy toward one of the sheds. He moved like someone who'd been doing this alone for so long that he'd forgotten there was any other way. Mara thought about what Ruth had said. Violent temper. Dangerous. She thought about the way Caleb had looked at her, like she was already a failure. Then she thought about Mrs. Hutchins' cold dismissal, the other girls' laughter, every door in town that had closed in her face. Something hot and fierce sparked in her chest. They all expected her to fail. Well, she'd see about that. Dawn came cold and gray. Mara woke to darkness, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She dressed quickly, her fingers clumsy with cold, and made her way downstairs. The house was silent. No sign of Caleb. Outside, the yard was just beginning to lighten, the darkness pulling back reluctantly. Frost covered everything, glittering in the early light. She found Caleb in the barn, already working. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face before it hardened back to neutral. "You're up." You said dawn. He grunted, went back to what he was doing, repairing a broken stall door with quick, efficient movements. What do you want me to do? He didn't look up. Horses need feeding. Water troughs need filling. After that, start mucking the stalls. Pitch the dirty hay into the wheelbarrow. Fresh hay from that pile there, you understand? Yes. Then get to it. Feeding the horses wasn't hard. They were big, gentle creatures who nickered softly when she approached. She found the grain bins, measured out portions the way she'd seen Caleb do, moved from stall to stall. The water troughs were harder. The pump outside fought her at first, the handle stiff and resistant. Her arms ached after the first bucket. By the fifth, they were screaming. But she kept going. Mucking the stalls was worse. The pitchfork was heavier than it looked. The dirty hay was wet and dense, clumped together with manure and mud. She had to use her whole body to lift each forkful, and even then, half of it fell off before she could get it to the wheelbarrow. Her back started hurting after 10 minutes. After 30, it was a constant throb. She kept going. Caleb passed by occasionally, checking on his own work, and she felt his eyes on her, watching, waiting for her to give up. She didn't. By midday, she'd finished 3 stalls. There were 12 total. Her hands were blistered. Her arms felt like rubber. Her back screamed every time she bent down. She started on the 4th stall. Stop! Caleb's voice made her jump. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Take a break. There's food in the house. I can keep... I said take a break. You're moving like an old woman. You're no good to me if you collapse. It wasn't kindness. It was practicality. But Mara was too tired to care. She set down the pitchfork and headed to the house on legs that barely held her. The pattern repeated for days. Up at dawn. Work until her body begged her to stop. Keep working anyway. Caleb spoke to her only to give instructions or corrections. You're doing it wrong. Watch. He'd demonstrate once, quick and impatient, then expect her to replicate it perfectly. When she couldn't, he didn't yell. He just looked at her with that flat, dismissive expression that somehow felt worse than yelling. But she learned how to lift with her legs instead of her back, how to brace the pitchfork for better leverage, which horses liked to be talked to and which preferred silence, how to read the weather by the way the wind felt and the clouds looked. Her body adapted slowly, painfully. The blisters burst and hardened into calluses. The aches became familiar, then faded to background noise. She worked through rain that turned the yard into a mud pit, through wind that stole her breath, through cold that made her fingers go numb. And gradually, something changed. She started finishing tasks, not quickly, not perfectly, but completely. The stalls got mucked, the fences got repaired, the tools got organized. Caleb still barely spoke to her, but she noticed him watching her more often, noticed him not correcting her as much. Noticed that when she finished something, he'd inspect it and then move on without comment, which, she was learning, was Caleb's version of approval. 3 weeks in, something happened. She was in the barn, hauling feed sacks to reorganize the storage area. The sacks weighed 50 pounds each, and she'd developed a technique of rolling them onto her shoulder, using her whole body to lift. She didn't hear Caleb approach. You're stronger than you were. The words startled her so much she almost dropped the sack. She turned to find him leaning against a post, his expression unreadable. Thank you? It came out like a question. Wasn't a compliment, just a fact. But something in his tone was different, less sharp. You've stuck around longer than I expected. Did you expect me to leave? Everyone does. I'm not everyone. He studied her for a long moment, and for the first time, Mara felt like he was actually seeing her, not just assessing her usefulness, but seeing her. No, he said finally. I guess you're not. He pushed off the post and headed back outside, leaving Mara standing there with a 50-pound feed sack on her shoulder and something warm and unfamiliar uncurling in her chest. Pride, maybe, or just the satisfaction of proving someone wrong. The town came calling on a cold afternoon in early November. Mara was replacing boards on the paddock fence when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see 3 riders, men she didn't recognize, coming up the mountain road. They pulled up in the yard, their eyes sweeping over the ranch with expressions that made Mara's stomach tighten. Thornidge, one of them called. You around? Caleb emerged from the main house, moving with that deliberate calm that Mara had learned meant he was tense. What do you want, Carson? The man who'd called out, Carson, apparently, was middle-aged, well-fed, wearing clothes too nice for ranch work. The other two men looked like hired hands. All three of them were staring at Mara. "Heard you got yourself some help." Carson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Wanted to see for myself." "You've seen. Now leave." Now, Caleb, no need to be unfriendly." Carson dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with the confidence of someone used to going where he pleased. "This is that boarding house girl, isn't it? Mara something?" Mara's hands tightened on the fence post. She wanted to say something, but the look Caleb shot her was clear. Stay quiet. "Not your business." "Sure it is. We're neighbors after all. I worry about you up here all alone. And now you've got this young lady." He said lady with just enough emphasis to make it an insult. "Living here with you. People are going to talk." "Let them." Carson laughed, a sound his men echoed dutifully. "You always were a stubborn bastard. But seriously, Caleb, look at her. You think she belongs on a ranch? Girls like that are built for... Well, not this." Mara felt heat flood her face, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd heard worse. She could handle this. What she didn't expect was Caleb's response. "She's doing the work." His voice was low, dangerous. "More than I can say for most men who claim to know ranching." The smile faded from Carson's face. "Watch your tone. Get off my land." For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Carson's hand moved toward his belt where Mara could see the handle of a gun. The hired hands shifted in their saddles. Then Carson seemed to recalculate. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine, we'll go. But Thornidge," he swung back up onto his horse. "You might want to think about what you're doing here. Girl like that, alone with you on this mountain, no one to protect her. Accidents happen." The threat hung in the air. Caleb took a step forward, and something in his posture made all three horses sidestep nervously. "Try it," he said quietly. "See what happens." Carson's jaw tightened, but he pulled his horse around. "You're making enemies, Caleb." "I've always had enemies. Get the hell off my property." They left, but slowly, making it clear they were leaving by choice, not command. When they were out of sight, Mara finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Caleb stood in the yard, his shoulders tight, staring after them. "Are they going to be trouble?" Mara asked quietly. He turned to look at her, and his expression was hard. "They've always been trouble, but now they've got a new reason to make it worse. Because of me. Because they're bastards looking for any excuse." He started toward the barn. "Don't worry about it. Finish that fence." But Mara did worry, because she'd seen the way those men looked at her. Like she was a weakness, a vulnerability, something that could be exploited. And she'd seen something else too, the way Caleb had stepped forward, positioned himself between her and them, not because he was soft, not because he liked her, but because she was his responsibility, his worker, part of his ranch. And Caleb Thornidge, for all his harsh edges and cold silences, protected what was his. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind howl around the house, thinking about Carson's words. Accidents happen. Thinking about what would happen if more men came, if they came when Caleb wasn't there, if they decided that getting to Caleb meant going through her. She thought about leaving, packing her bag and walking back down that mountain road at first light. But where would she go? Back to the boarding house? Mrs. Hutchins had made it clear she wasn't welcome. Another town? With no money, no references, no connections? No. She'd made her choice when she came here. She'd committed. And despite everything, the exhaustion, the pain, the threat of violence, she realized something surprising. She didn't want to leave. For the first time in her life, she was doing something real, building something, proving something, not to the town, not even to Caleb, to herself. She'd survived 3 weeks of the hardest work she'd ever done. She'd earned grudging respect from a man who respected no one. She'd found strength she didn't know she had, and she wasn't going to give that up because some entitled rancher wanted to play games. Downstairs, she heard a door open and close, footsteps on the porch. Curious, she got out of bed and moved to the window. Caleb was standing in the yard, just standing there in the cold, looking out at the mountains. His breath made clouds in the frigid air. He looked tired. Not physically, deeper than that. Lonely. The word came to Mara unbidden, but once it arrived, she couldn't shake it. This man had chosen isolation, had built walls, physical and otherwise, to keep the world at bay, had convinced himself that was strength. But standing there in the dark, alone with nothing but the wind and the mountains, he just looked lonely. Mara stepped back from the window. She understood loneliness. She'd lived with it her whole life. Maybe that's why they worked well together. Two people who'd learned to survive alone, finding an unexpected partnership in the quiet spaces between words. She went back to bed, and this time she slept. The days grew shorter and colder, and with them came a shift in the rhythm of the ranch that Mara felt in her bones before she understood it with her mind. Caleb worked harder, longer, with an urgency that hadn't been there before. He was preparing for something, though he didn't say what. He'd leave before dawn and return after dark, checking fences in the far pastures, reinforcing gates, moving livestock to lower ground. When Mara asked why, he just said winter, like that explained everything. Maybe it did, up here. She learned by watching, by doing. He'd point at something that needed fixing and walk away, expecting her to figure it out. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she had to swallow her pride and ask, and he'd show her once with his hands moving quick and impatient while she tried to memorize every movement. Pay attention. He'd snap when she asked him to repeat something. I'm not doing this twice, but he always did. Eventually. With a sigh that suggested she was testing his patience, but he'd come back and show her again, slower this time, until she got it. One morning she found him in the equipment shed, sorting through tools with the kind of focused intensity she'd come to recognize as worry disguised as work. Snow's coming early, he said without looking up. Can feel it. How early? How weak? Maybe less. He picked up an axe, tested the edge with his thumb, set it aside. We're not ready. What needs doing? He finally looked at her, that assessing stare she'd grown familiar with. Everything. Over the next days, she learned what everything meant on a mountain ranch facing winter. Firewood needed splitting and stacking, not just some, cords of it, enough to keep the house warm through months of brutal cold. Caleb showed her how to swing the axe, how to read the grain of the wood, where to aim for the split. Her first attempts were pathetic, the axe bouncing off the logs or getting stuck halfway through. But she kept at it, and gradually her swings grew stronger, more accurate. The pile of split wood grew. The barn needed weatherproofing. Every gap in the walls, every loose board, every crack where cold could seep in, they had to find it and fix it. Mara spent hours on a ladder, hammering boards into place while the wind tried to knock her off. Her hands were so cold she could barely feel the hammer. She fell twice, landing hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Both times she got back up and climbed the ladder again. Caleb said nothing, but she caught him watching. The smokehouse needed stocking. Caleb butchered a pig, his movements efficient and unsentimental, and showed Mara how to prepare the meat for curing. It was hard, bloody work that made her stomach turn at first, but hunger was a good teacher. She learned to look at an animal and see food, survival, the difference between making it through winter or not. You squeamish? Caleb asked, noting her expression. Getting over it. Good. Up here, being squeamish gets you killed. She wanted to ask if he was always this grim, if he ever thought about anything beyond survival, but she already knew the answer. This mountain had shaped him into something hard and practical, stripped away anything that wasn't essential. She wondered what he'd been like before, if there'd ever been a before. One afternoon, while they were reinforcing the paddock fence, she worked up the nerve to ask, How long have you been up here? He drove a nail with 3 hard strikes before answering. 8 years. That's a long time to be alone. I'm not alone. I've got the land, the animals, the work. That's enough. Is it? The hammer paused mid-swing. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Why are you asking? Just curious? Don't be. He went back to hammering, the conversation clearly over. But that night, after they'd finished evening chores and Mara was heading toward the house, he spoke again. I came up here because I needed to. Town life, people. It wasn't for me anymore. Got tired of everyone having opinions about how I should live, what I should be. Up here, none of that matters. Just me and what I can build with my own hands. It was the most he'd said to her about himself, ever. Mara stopped, turned. You ever regret it? Regret what? leaving people behind. He was quiet for a long moment, his face hidden in shadow. Can't regret leaving something that never wanted you in the first place. Then he walked into the barn and didn't come back out. Mara stood in the yard, her breath forming clouds in the cold air, and understood something fundamental about the man she was working for. He hadn't chosen isolation because he loved solitude. He'd chosen it because the alternative, being surrounded by people who made him feel alone, was worse. She knew that feeling. The snow started 5 days later, exactly when Caleb said it would. It began as light flurries that melted on contact, but by evening it was coming down heavy and relentless. Mara had never seen snow like this, thick curtains of white that erased the world beyond the ranch, turning everything into an endless pale nothing. "Stay close to the house," Caleb told her that night. "Weather like this, you get turned around, you die." "You're very reassuring." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "I'm realistic. This mountain doesn't care about your feelings. You respect it, or it kills you." The storm lasted 3 days. Mara quickly learned the hierarchy of winter survival. Animals first, always. No matter how cold, how tired, how miserable, the horses and cattle needed feeding, watering, checking. She and Caleb worked in shifts, bundled in every layer they owned, trudging through snow that grew deeper by the hour. The cold was unlike anything she'd experienced. It didn't just make you uncomfortable, it hurt. Her face felt like it was being stabbed by tiny knives. Her lungs burned with every breath. Her fingers and toes went from painful to numb to non-existent. But the work didn't stop, so neither did she. On the second day, one of the horses got out, spooked by something in the storm. Caleb went after it immediately, disappearing into the white without hesitation. Mara waited in the barn, listening to the wind shriek, watching the minutes stretch into an hour. Then 2. Fear crept in, cold and insistent. What if he didn't come back? What if he was lying somewhere in the snow, hurt, freezing? What if she was alone up here? She was seriously considering going to look for him, stupid as that would be, when he finally appeared out of the storm, leading the horse, both of them crusted with ice. "You were gone a long time," she said, hating how her voice shook. Horse made it to the south ridge. He started rubbing the animal down with rough efficiency. Took a while to find him. "You could have gotten lost." "I know this land. In a storm like this, I know this land." He stopped working and looked at her. "You worried about me?" "I was worried about being stuck up here alone. Practical." He nodded approval. "Good. Sentiment gets you killed. Self-interest keeps you alive." But something in his expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that, or maybe didn't want to. When the storm finally broke, the world had been transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep in places, sculpted by the wind into shapes that looked almost deliberate. The mountains stood sharp and white against an impossibly blue sky, beautiful in a way that made Mara's chest ache. "Pretty," she said. Caleb snorted. "Pretty means dangerous. All this snow, one warm day and we get floods. Ice on the roof means structural damage. Drifts block roads, trap livestock, hide hazards." He started toward the barn. "Nothing up here is just pretty. Everything has teeth." She followed him, learning again that on this mountain, survival meant seeing the threat in everything beautiful, the danger in every moment of peace. They spent the next week digging out. Paths to the barn, the sheds, the paddocks. The work was endless, monotonous, backbreaking. Shovel snow, rest, shovel more. Mara's back screamed. Her shoulders felt like they were made of ground glass. Every night she collapsed into bed too exhausted even to think. But she was getting stronger. She could see it in the mirror, her face thinner, her arms showing muscle definition that hadn't been there before. Feel it in how her body responded to demands that would have destroyed her 2 months ago. She was changing, becoming something harder, tougher, becoming someone who belonged on this mountain. The town showed up again 2 weeks after the first snow. This time it wasn't Carson and his men. It was Mrs. Hutchins, arriving in a sleigh driven by one of the town's stable hands, her face pinched with cold and something else. Disapproval, maybe. Or concern masquerading as duty. Mara was hauling water when she saw them coming up the road. Her stomach dropped. Caleb emerged from the barn, saw the sleigh, and his jaw tightened. "Inside," he told Mara. "What?" Get inside the house, now. I'm not. This isn't a request. His voice had that edge that meant don't argue. Go. She went, but she didn't go far. Just to the porch, where she could see and hear everything while staying technically obedient. Mrs. Hutchins climbed down from the sleigh with the careful movements of someone unused to such rustic transport. She was dressed for town, not mountains. A heavy coat over good clothes, impractical boots, gloves that looked warm but wouldn't last an hour of real work. "Mr. Thornidge," she said, her breath forming clouds. "Thank you for seeing me. Didn't say I'd see you. You just showed up." "Yes. Well," she smoothed her coat. "I've come about Mara. She's working out fine. That's not the issue." Mrs. Hutchins glanced toward the house, spotted Mara on the porch. "Might we speak privately?" "No." "Mr. Thornidge, this is a delicate matter. Then maybe you shouldn't have come." Mrs. Hutchins' expression hardened. She'd probably been pretty once, Mara thought, before life and whatever disappointments it held had turned her sharp and cold. "Very well, I'll be direct. There's talk in town about you and Miss Bell, about the impropriety of a young woman living alone with a man on this mountain. People are concerned. Let them be concerned somewhere else. This isn't a joke. Miss Bell's reputation—" "Her reputation?" Caleb's voice could have cut stone. "Where was all this concern for her reputation when you were happy to send her up here? When you gave her the choice between this job and the street?" Mrs. Hutchins' face colored. "I gave her an opportunity. You threw her away. Like she was garbage. And now that she's actually making something of herself, now you care about her reputation." "The circumstances were different then." "No, they weren't. You just didn't give a damn until it became inconvenient for you." Mara watched this exchange with something like wonder. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever looked at someone trying to tear her down and told them to go to hell. Mrs. Hutchins drew herself up, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Regardless of past decisions, I have a responsibility to the young women under my care. She's not under your care. She's under mine." "Exactly my point. An unmarried man and woman living together. We're not living together. She works here. Room and board is part of her wages. There's nothing improper about it. Nevertheless, the appearance— I don't care about appearance. She does her work. She earns her keep. That's the end of it. If the town has a problem with that, they can come up here and say it to my face instead of sending you." Mrs. Hutchins was quiet for a moment, recalculating. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, become softer, almost pleading. "Mr. Thornidge, I understand you've become accustomed to Miss Bell's help, but surely you can see this situation isn't sustainable. What happens when winter really sets in? When you're completely snowed in for weeks, a young woman alone with you? I'll say this once more, and then I'm done talking." Caleb's voice was quiet but absolute. "Mara Bell is the hardest worker I've ever had. She's earned her place here 10 times over. Whatever the town thinks about it means exactly nothing to me. She stays as long as she wants to stay. Now get off my property." "Mr. Thornidge, I said get off my property." The stable hand, who had been watching this entire exchange with wide eyes, cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, we should go. Weather's turning." Mrs. Hutchins looked like she wanted to argue more, but something in Caleb's stance, or maybe just the cold reality of being on his land far from town with darkness coming, made her reconsider. "This isn't over," she said. "Yeah, it is." She climbed back into the sleigh with as much dignity as she could manage. As they pulled away, she looked one more time at Mara. "You have a choice, girl," she called. "You don't have to stay here." Mara stepped off the porch, into the snow, where both Caleb and Mrs. Hutchins could see her clearly. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm staying." The sleigh disappeared down the mountain road. Caleb stood in the yard, watching until they were completely out of sight. Then he turned to Mara. "You should have stayed inside." "I wanted to hear." "And?" "And thank you for what you said." He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "I said the truth. You work hard. Rest is nobody's business. Still, no one's ever—" She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Ever what?" "Stood up for me like that." He was quiet for a moment, then, "People in that town, they're so worried about what everyone else thinks. They forget to look at what's actually in front of them. You're worth 10 of them." The words hit her like a physical thing. She felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously, embarrassed. "Don't go getting emotional on me," Caleb said, but his tone wasn't harsh. "We've got work to do. Those fence posts on the east side won't fix themselves." He walked toward the barn, and Mara followed, and they worked until dark like nothing had happened. But something had. That night, Mara lay in bed, unable to sleep, replaying the conversation in her mind. "You're worth 10 of them." Simple words, practical words. Caleb probably hadn't even thought much about saying them, but to Mara, who'd spent her entire life being told, directly and indirectly, that she was worthless, they meant everything. She got up, moved to the window. Outside, the moon made the snow glow silver. The mountain stood eternal and indifferent, and somewhere in the house below, Caleb was probably still awake, probably working on something, because he never seemed to stop. She understood him better now. Understood that his harshness wasn't cruelty. It was honesty. He didn't coddle, didn't lie to make people feel better, didn't waste words on things that didn't matter. When he said she worked hard, he meant it. When he said she'd earned her place, he meant it. When he said she was worth something, he meant it. And maybe that's what she'd been searching for her whole life. Not someone to tell her pretty lies, but someone to tell her the hard truth, that she was capable, strong, valuable, that she belonged. December came in cold and stayed that way. The work continued, relentless and necessary. Animals to tend, equipment to maintain, constant vigilance against the 1,000 ways winter tried to destroy what you'd built. Mara learned to read the weather, to sense when a storm was coming by the taste of the air and the way the animals behaved. Learned to work faster, smarter, conserving energy for the long haul instead of burning out. Learned to think like someone who lived on a mountain where every decision had consequences and second chances were rare. She and Caleb developed a rhythm. They didn't talk much, there wasn't time, and neither of them was much for conversation anyway, but they communicated through action, through understanding what needed doing and doing it. She'd see him struggling with something and move to help without being asked. He'd notice her tiring and take over the heavier work without comment. It was partnership born of necessity, but it worked. One evening after a particularly brutal day, temperatures well below freezing, pipes frozen, half the herd trying to break through fencing to get at lower, warmer ground, they finally finished and stumbled into the house like survivors reaching shore. Caleb built up the fire while Mara heated water for coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, too tired to even think about real food, nursing their cups and letting the warmth seep back into their bones. "That was bad," Mara said finally. "That was Tuesday." But there was weariness in his voice. "It'll get worse." Encouraging. "It's the truth. This mountain, it tests you. Every day, every season, you either get stronger or you break." "Which one did you do?" He looked at her over his coffee. "Both. Broke first, then got stronger." "What broke you?" For a long time she didn't think he'd answer. Then, "I had a wife once, partner. We were going to build this place together, make it into something real." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "She lasted one winter, left in the spring, said she couldn't do it anymore. The isolation, the hardship, the loneliness. Said I cared more about this land than about her." "Did you?" "No, but I couldn't leave. This place, it's not just a ranch. It's proof that I can survive on my own terms, that I don't need anyone else's approval or help or pity. When she asked me to choose between her and the mountain," he shrugged. "I chose the mountain." "Do you regret it?" "Every day." He set down his cup. "And not at all. If she'd stayed, she would have been miserable. We both would have. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them go." Mara thought about that. About choosing between people and places, between comfort and purpose, between who you are and who someone else needs you to be. "I don't think I could leave," she said, "even if someone asked me to." "Why not?" "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving. I'm building something, even if it's just—" She gestured vaguely. "I don't know, proving I can." He nodded slowly. "That matters. More than people think." He stood, stretching. "Get some sleep. We've got early morning tomorrow." "We always have early morning?" "Yeah, that's mountain life." He headed upstairs, leaving Mara alone in the kitchen with her cooling coffee and her thoughts. She thought about his wife, whoever she'd been. Thought about leaving this place, going back to town to comfort and civilization and people. The thought made her feel hollow. This mountain was harsh and cold and unforgiving. It demanded everything and gave back nothing but the satisfaction of survival. But it was hers now, in a way nothing else had ever been. She wasn't leaving. Christmas came and went without ceremony. Just another day of work, though Caleb did make a better dinner than usual. Venison stew, bread that was only slightly burned, even some preserved fruit. "This is nice," Mara said. "It's food." "No, I mean..." She gestured at the table, the meal, the rare moment of sitting down together. It's nice." He looked uncomfortable. "Don't go making it into something it's not." "I'm not. I'm just saying thank you. You helped cook it." "Then thank you for eating it." He almost smiled. Almost. "You're strange, you know that?" "I've been told." They ate in silence after that. But it was comfortable silence. The kind that didn't need filling. Outside, snow fell softly, adding to the already impressive drifts. The wind had died down for once, leaving the night quiet except for the crackle of the fire. "This is the first Christmas I haven't hated," Mara said suddenly. Caleb looked up. "Why'd you hate Christmas?" "Because it's supposed to be about family and belonging and all that. When you don't have those things, it just reminds you what you're missing." She stirred her stew. "But up here, none of that matters. It's just another day. Somehow, that's better." "Nothing up here is about what it's supposed to be," Caleb said. "It's just what it is." "Yeah," she smiled. "I like that." They finished eating, cleaned up together, then went their separate ways for the night. But as Mara climbed the stairs, she felt something she hadn't expected. Contentment, not happiness. That was too big, too fragile. But contentment. The quiet satisfaction of a hard day's work done, a meal shared, a place where she fit. It was enough. January brought the worst cold yet. Temperatures that made previous weeks seem mild. The kind of cold that made metal burn your skin on contact, that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground, that killed exposed flesh in minutes. They worked in shorter shifts now, neither of them willing to say it, but both understanding that pride wouldn't keep you alive up here. 20 minutes outside, then back to the fire to thaw. Then out again. One morning, Mara made a mistake. She was carrying water to the far paddock when her foot hit ice hidden under snow. She went down hard, the bucket flying, water splashing everywhere. In the split second of falling, she twisted wrong and felt something in her ankle give. The pain was immediate and nauseating. She lay in the snow, cursing herself, trying to breathe through it, stupid, careless. Caleb had warned her about ice. "Mara?" His voice came from somewhere nearby. She tried to respond, couldn't quite manage it. Then he was there, kneeling beside her, his face tight with concern. "What happened?" "Fell. My ankle." He didn't waste time with questions, just scooped her up. She started to protest the indignity, but the pain shut her up and carried her back to the house. Inside, he set her on a chair and knelt to examine the injury. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he unlaced her boot and carefully pulled it off. She hissed in pain. "Bad?" she asked. "Swollen. Might be sprained. Might be broken." He looked up at her. "Can you move it?" She tried. White-hot agony shot up her leg. "Jesus! Don't! Keep it still." He stood. "I'll wrap it. Keep you off it for a few days." "Few days?" "Caleb, there's work." "There's always work. It'll wait." "You can't do everything alone." "I did it before you got here. I can do it now." He was already moving to get bandages. "You rest, you heal, then you work. Pushing through an injury up here, that's how you lose limbs. Or worse." He wrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency, his face set in concentration. When he finished, he sat back. "That'll do for now. Keep your weight off it. I'll bring you food, water, whatever you need." "I can manage." "Mara." He looked at her, and his expression was serious. "Let me take care of this. You've earned it." She wanted to argue, wanted to say she didn't need taking care of, didn't want to be a burden, but the pain in her ankle and the exhaustion in her bones made the argument die unspoken. "Okay," she said quietly. "Good." He stood. "I've got to finish morning chores. I'll check on you in a few hours." He left, and Mara sat in the chair by the fire, feeling useless and frustrated and, strangely, touched by his matter-of-fact care. The next 3 days were torture of a different kind. Sitting still while knowing work needed doing, hearing Caleb outside working alone, feeling like a burden. But he never complained, just did what needed doing, came back to check on her, brought food, redressed her ankle. "How's it healing?" she asked on the third day. "Better." He pressed gently around the swelling. "Sprain, not a break. You got lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky." "Trust me, it is." He stood. "Another few days and you can start moving around. Light work only." "Caleb, light work only." She glared at him. He looked unmoved. "You're stubborn," she said. "Yeah, so are you. That's why this works." And despite her frustration, she found herself smiling. By the time her ankle healed enough to walk without wincing, something fundamental had shifted between them. Mara couldn't pinpoint exactly when or how. Maybe it was the days of forced rest, watching Caleb work himself ragged to cover both their loads. Maybe it was the quiet evenings when he'd sit by the fire after finishing chores, too tired to do anything but exist in the same space. Maybe it was just time, the slow accumulation of shared hardship, building something neither of them had intended. Whatever it was, the silence between them felt different now, less like avoidance, more like understanding. She returned to work gradually, testing her ankle's limits, ignoring the twinges of pain because staying idle made her feel like she was disappearing. Caleb watched her like a hawk for the first few days, ready to bark at her if she pushed too hard, but she was careful. She'd learned that lesson. The ranch was holding together, but barely. Winter was showing its teeth now, the kind of cold that crept into everything: wood, stone, bone. Mornings began with assessing what had frozen overnight, what needed thawing, what had broken. The pump froze regularly, pipes cracked, tools shattered if you weren't careful. It was a constant battle against the mountain's determination to reclaim everything human hands had built. One morning in late January, Mara woke to a sound she didn't recognize. Not wind, not animals, something else. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Caleb already in the kitchen, his expression dark. "What is it?" "Cattle." He was pulling on his heavy coat. "Something's got them spooked. Could be wolves, could be a cat. Either way, we need to check." "I'm coming with you." "Your ankle is fine. You're not going out there alone." He looked like he wanted to argue, then just nodded. "Keep close. Don't do anything stupid." They armed themselves, Caleb with his rifle, Mara with a shotgun he'd been teaching her to use, and headed into the pre-dawn darkness. The temperature was brutal, well below zero, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache with each breath. The cattle were in the lower pasture, and as they approached, Mara could hear them, the nervous lowing, the sound of hooves churning frozen ground. Something had definitely scared them. Caleb moved ahead, rifle ready, his body tense. Mara followed, trying to see into the darkness beyond their lantern's reach. Then she saw it. Just for a moment, caught in the light, yellow eyes, low to the ground, watching them. A wolf, big and lean, its breath steaming in the cold. "There," she whispered. Caleb saw it too. He raised the rifle, but the wolf was already moving, disappearing into the darkness with a speed that seemed impossible. "There'll be more," Caleb said quietly. "They hunt in packs. We need to get these cattle closer to the barn." What followed was 2 hours of cold, exhausting work. Herding nervous cattle through snow and darkness with the constant awareness that somewhere out there, wolves were watching, waiting. Mara's ankle throbbed. Her hands were numb even inside her gloves. But she kept moving, kept working, because stopping meant giving the wolves an opportunity. By the time they got the herd secured and reinforced the fencing, the sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky. They stumbled back to the house, both of them shaking with cold and exhaustion. Inside, Caleb built up the fire while Mara heated water for coffee. Neither spoke. There wasn't energy for words, but when she handed him his cup, their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or just the simple acknowledgement that they'd faced something dangerous together and survived. "You did good out there," Caleb said finally. "So did you." "I mean it, you didn't panic, didn't freeze up. That's rare." Mara warmed her hands on her cup. "I was terrified the whole time." "Yeah, but you did it anyway. That's what matters." She thought about that, about the difference between not being afraid and doing what needed doing despite the fear. How do you do it? She asked. Live with that kind of danger all the time? You just do. Fear's useful, keeps you alert, but you can't let it run you. He paused. Most people in town, they think bravery means not being scared. They're wrong. Bravery is being scared and still getting the job done. Is that what you think I am? Brave? He looked at her, his expression serious. Yeah, I do. Coming from Caleb, who didn't hand out compliments, who barely spoke at all most days, those words hit harder than Mara expected. She had to look away, blinking against sudden tears she refused to shed. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. Just stating facts. But there was something gentle in his voice that hadn't been there before. Something that made Mara's chest feel tight and warm despite the cold still clinging to her bones. The wolf attacks continued sporadically over the next weeks. Never a full assault, just probing, testing the defenses, looking for weakness. Caleb and Mara took turns on night watch, one of them always alert while the other slept. It was exhausting, adding another layer of strain to already brutal days, but there wasn't a choice. During one of those long nights, sitting by the window with the shotgun across her lap, Mara found herself thinking about how much had changed. 4 months ago, she'd been the girl nobody wanted, the burden, the joke. Now she was sitting in the darkness with a weapon in her hands, guarding livestock from predators, living a life that would have seemed impossible. She liked who she was becoming. That was the truth she hadn't expected. Not just that she could survive this life, but that she wanted to. That despite the hardship and danger and bone-deep exhaustion, she felt more alive than she ever had in town, where safety came at the cost of slow suffocation. You're thinking too loud. Caleb's voice from the doorway made her jump. She turned to find him standing there, rumpled from sleep, watching her with those sharp eyes that saw too much. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. Can't sleep anyway. He came to sit in the other chair, both of them now watching the darkness beyond the window. What were you thinking about? How different everything is. From town? From who I was. She adjusted her grip on the shotgun. I keep expecting to wake up and find out I can't do this, that I'm still that girl they all laughed at. You're not. How do you know? Because that girl wouldn't have made it a week up here. He was quiet for a moment. People aren't fixed things, Mara. They change. Mountain changes them faster than most places, but the potential was always there. You just needed the right conditions to show it. Like a plant. Like anything living. Right soil, right weather, you grow. Wrong conditions, you die. Simple as that. She thought about his words, about potential and conditions and growth. What about you? Has the mountain changed you? Every day. Not always for the better. He rubbed his face. Isolation makes you hard. Sometimes too hard. You forget how to be around people, how to care about anything beyond survival. But you care about the ranch. The ranch is survival. It's not... He stopped, searching for words. It's not the same as caring about people. Do you miss it, caring about people? He looked at her then, and his expression was complicated. Starting to remember what it feels like. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither seemed ready to fully acknowledge. Mara felt her heart speed up, felt heat in her face that had nothing to do with the fire. I should let you get back to sleep, she said quietly. Yeah. But he didn't move. Mara, yeah? He seemed to struggle with something, then shook his head. Nothing. Wake me when you need a break. He left, and Mara sat alone with her racing thoughts and the weight of unspoken things pressing against her chest. February arrived with a viciousness that made January look gentle. Temperatures plummeted further. The snow that had seemed deep before became mountainous, drifts reaching the eaves of the barn. They had to shovel paths every morning just to move between buildings, and by afternoon the paths would be half filled again. The work became even more demanding. Everything took longer in the deep cold and deeper snow. Simple tasks became ordeals. The constant physical strain wore them both down, and with it came shorter tempers, sharper words. One afternoon, Mara made a mistake with the hay storage, stacked it wrong, creating a collapse that scattered bales across the barn floor. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was careless, and she knew it. Caleb saw it and went silent. Not angry silence, worse, disappointed silence. I'm sorry, Mara said. I wasn't thinking... No, you weren't. His voice was flat. How many times do I have to tell you? Everything up here matters. One mistake, one moment of not paying attention, and I know, I'm sorry, I'll fix it. You're damn right you'll fix it. He walked away, and Mara stood there feeling the sting of his words more than she wanted to admit. She spent the next 2 hours restacking the hay properly, her anger building with each bale. She was tired. They both were. One mistake after months of hard work, and he acted like she'd burned the place down. By the time she finished, she was furious. She found Caleb in the equipment shed and didn't bother hiding her anger. "You want to talk about mistakes?" she said. "Let's talk about how you left the gate unsecured last week, and we spent half a day tracking down strays. Or how you forgot to check the south fence, and we had to do emergency repairs in the middle of a storm." He looked up, surprised by her tone. "What's your point?" "My point is, you're not perfect either. You make mistakes. Everyone does. But when I do it, you act like it's proof I don't belong here. That's not—" "Yes, it is." She was shaking now, months of frustration pouring out. "I work my ass off. Every day. In conditions that would break most people. I've earned my place here 10 times over. One mistake doesn't erase that." "I never said it did." "You didn't have to. I saw it in your face. That looked like you were just waiting for me to fail." The silence that followed was sharp and uncomfortable. Caleb set down the tool he was holding, straightened to his full height. "You're right," he said. Mara blinked, thrown by the admission. "What?" "You're right. I was harder on you than I needed to be. It's just—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You're doing good work, Mara. Better than good. Sometimes I forget you've only been here a few months because you work like you've been doing this for years. And when you make a mistake, it catches me off guard because I've started expecting— Perfection? No. Better." He looked at her directly. "I've started expecting you to be better than me, which isn't fair." Mara felt her anger deflating, replaced by something more complicated. "Why would you expect that?" "Because you are better. You learn faster, work harder, don't carry all the baggage I do. This place—" He gestured vaguely at the ranch beyond the shed. "This place deserves someone like you running it, not someone like me." "Caleb, I'm serious. You've got something I lost a long time ago. The ability to care about more than just survival. To see possibility instead of just threat." Mara didn't know what to say. She'd never heard him talk like this, never seen him this raw. "I don't want to run this place," she said finally. "I want to work it. With you." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. "Then we need to be able to call each other out when we mess up. No walking on eggshells, no holding back. That's the only way this works." "Deal." She held out her hand. He looked at it for a moment, then took it. His hand was rough, calloused, warm, despite the cold. The handshake lasted a moment longer than necessary, neither of them quite ready to let go. When they finally did, the air between them felt charged with something unnamed. The thaw came in early March. Not real spring, just a brief respite from the worst of winter's grip. Temperatures rose just enough to make the air feel almost warm, the snow to turn slushy, the sun to show itself for more than a few gray hours. It should have been a relief. Instead, it brought new problems. The melting snow meant flooding, ice dams on the roof, mud everywhere. The horses and cattle churned the paddocks into swamps. Every path became a hazard, and with the thaw came the risk that Caleb had mentioned back in December, structural damage from all that weight, all that ice. They were checking the barn roof when they heard it, a crack like a gunshot, followed by a groan of stressed timber. "Move!" Caleb grabbed Mara and pulled her back just as a section of the roof sagged, ice and snow sliding off in a minor avalanche. They stood there breathing hard, staring at the damage. A beam had cracked, not broken completely but compromised. Dangerous. "Can we fix it?" Mara asked. "We have to." Caleb was already assessing the problem. "If we don't, the whole roof could go in the next storm. But it means going up there, which, with all this ice, is suicidal, I know." Mara studied the roof. "We need more hands." "Not an option." "Caleb, be reasonable. This is a 2-person job minimum. 3 would be better. We need help." "I don't work with town people." "Then we'll figure it out ourselves. But you're not going up there alone, and I'm not experienced enough to be much help. So we either get creative or we risk losing the barn." He hated it. She could see that in every line of his body. But he also knew she was right. "There's a guy," he said finally, reluctantly. "Lives further up the mountain, been up here even longer than me. Knows construction, keeps to himself, which is why we get along. I could ask." "Then ask." 2 days later, a man showed up. Older than Caleb by maybe 15 years, weathered face, quiet eyes. He introduced himself as Sam, shook hands with Mara without comment on her presence, and got to work. Together, the three of them spent 4 days on the roof repair. It was dangerous, exhausting work, balancing on icy surfaces, hauling materials, replacing the cracked beam while preventing further damage. More than once, someone slipped, caught themselves at the last second, heart pounding. But they got it done. The last evening, Sam accepted dinner as payment. They sat around the kitchen table, the first time Mara had seen Caleb voluntarily share a meal with anyone outside the two of them, and ate in comfortable silence. "Ranch looks good," Sam said eventually. "Better than the last time I was down here." "That was 4 years ago," Caleb said. "Yeah, you've made improvements," he glanced at Mara. "Help makes a difference." "It does," Caleb agreed. Sam nodded, understanding passing between the two men that Mara couldn't quite read. "You need anything else? You know where to find me." After he left, Mara helped Caleb clean up. "He seemed nice," she offered. "He is. As much as anyone up here can be." "You have a friend." Caleb looked at her. "So? So you're not as alone as you pretend to be." "One person I talk to maybe twice a year isn't exactly a social circle. It's more than nothing." She dried a plate. "Everyone needs someone, Caleb. Even you." "I have someone." The words came out quick, like he hadn't meant to say them, then quieter. "I have you." Mara's hands stilled. She looked at him, found him staring at the dishes with intense focus, his jaw tight. "Yeah," she said softly. "You do." They finished cleaning in silence, but it was the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. That night, Mara lay awake thinking about what was happening between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was eroding, worn away by proximity and shared danger and the simple fact of caring whether the other person survived each day. It scared her. Caring about someone, really caring, meant vulnerability. It meant the possibility of loss, of pain, of all the things she'd taught herself not to want because wanting led to disappointment. But it was too late. She cared. About Caleb, about the ranch, about this life they were building together. And she suspected he cared too, though he'd probably rather eat glass than admit it. The question was what they were going to do about it. The answer came from an unexpected direction. A week after the roof repair, riders appeared on the mountain road. Not Carson this time, someone worse. The law. Mara saw them first and felt her stomach drop. 2 men in official-looking coats, riding with the kind of authority that said they expected cooperation. "Caleb," she called. He came out of the barn, saw the riders, and his whole body went rigid. They stopped in the yard, and the older one, a man with gray hair and a marshal's badge, climbed down. "Caleb Thornidge?" "What do you want?" "We're here on behalf of Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins. She's filed a complaint regarding—" He glanced at Mara. "The situation here. Claims there's cause for concern about the welfare of Miss Mara Bell." Mara's heart started pounding. This wasn't just town gossip anymore. This was official interference. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "There's no situation. I work here, that's all." The marshal's expression was neutral, professional. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately. Standard procedure in cases like this." "Cases like what?" Caleb's voice was dangerous. "She just told you she's fine." "Mr. Thornidge, I understand you're protective of your employee, but I need to verify—" "You need to get the hell off my property." "Caleb," Mara said quietly. To the marshal, "I'll talk to you, but there's nothing to verify. I'm here by choice. I work, I get paid, I'm treated fairly. That's the whole story." The marshal studied her. "You're saying you have no complaints about your living situation?" "None." "You're free to leave any time you choose?" "Yes." "And Mr. Thornidge has never threatened you, coerced you, or acted inappropriately toward you?" "No, never." The questions continued for another 10 minutes. The marshal clearly following some kind of protocol, checking boxes, doing his due diligence. Through it all, Caleb stood 10 feet away, radiating tension, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, the marshal seemed satisfied. "All right, Miss Bell, I apologize for the intrusion. Given your statement and what I can see here, there doesn't appear to be cause for further investigation." He turned to Caleb. "However, I'd advise you to be mindful of appearances. The town's concerned, and that concern isn't going away. The town can mind its own business. Maybe, but if we get another complaint, I'll have to come back. And next time, it won't be just a conversation." He mounted his horse. "Good day to you both." They left, and Mara and Caleb stood in the yard watching them disappear. When they were finally out of sight, Caleb turned to her, his face dark with anger, but not at her. "This is going to keep happening," he said. "They're not going to let this go." "I know. They'll find a way to force you out, create enough pressure, enough legal trouble until staying becomes impossible." "Maybe," Mara met his eyes, "or maybe we give them something they can't argue with." "What do you mean?" She took a breath, the idea forming even as she spoke. "We make it official, legal, something they can't challenge." "Legal how?" "Marriage." The word dropped between them like a stone, and Caleb stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "You're not serious." "Why not? It solves the problem. I stay here legitimately. The town has nothing to complain about. Everyone moves on." "Mara, that's—" He shook his head. "You can't be that practical about marriage." "Why not? You were willing to marry once before, and you barely knew that woman before you did." "That was different." "How?" "Because I loved her." The words burst out of him, raw and honest. "Or thought I did. What you're suggesting, it's just a business arrangement. What's wrong with that?" "What's wrong with—" He stopped, looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Don't you want more than that?" Mara thought about it, about love and romance and all the things she'd watched other girls dream about, things that had always seemed impossibly distant for someone like her. "I want this," she said simply. "This life, this ranch, working beside you. If marriage makes that possible, then yes, I want that. The rest—" She shrugged. "The rest is stories people tell themselves. This is real." Caleb was quiet for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked toward the barn without answering. Mara stood alone in the yard, not sure if she'd just solved their problem or ruined everything. Caleb didn't speak to her for 2 days, not angry silence. She'd learned to read those. This was different, heavier. Like he was working through something too big for words, turning it over in his mind the way he examined a broken piece of equipment before deciding whether to repair or replace it. They worked side by side as always, the routine of the ranch demanding their cooperation regardless of personal complications. Feed the animals, check fences, haul supplies. The tasks hadn't changed, but the air between them had thickened with unspoken things. On the third morning, Mara was in the barn organizing tack when Caleb finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said." Her hand stilled on the bridle she was mending. And you're right. Practically speaking, it solves the problem." He leaned against a post, arms crossed, not looking at her. "But I need you to understand what you'd be signing up for. This isn't just some paperwork. Once we do this, the town will be watching even closer. Any sign of trouble, any hint that it's not real, they'll come down twice as hard. So we make it real." "How?" "We live in the same house already. We work together already. What changes?" Mara set down the bridle and turned to face him. "What has to change? People get married for all kinds of reasons, Caleb. Love is just one of them. Survival, partnership, practical necessity, those count too. Is that enough for you?" His eyes met hers finally, searching. Just survival and practicality? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Mara could have said yes, could have kept it simple and safe. Instead, she told the truth. "I don't know. Maybe 6 months ago it would have been, but now—" She hesitated. "I care about this place, about what we're building, about you, if I'm being honest. I don't know if that's love or just partnership or something else entirely, but it matters to me. You matter to me." Caleb's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face before he could hide it. "You matter to me too. That's what makes this complicated. If this were just business, I'd say yes without thinking, but it's not. And if we do this, if we make that commitment, I need to know you're sure. I'm sure about staying. I'm sure about the ranch. I'm sure about working beside you. Mara moved closer. Everything else, we figure it out as we go, same as we've been doing. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? Yeah, let's do it. He straightened from the post. But we do it right. Not some quick courthouse thing that looks like we're hiding something. We tell the town, have witnesses, make it legitimate. You want a wedding? I want people to know this is real, that you're here because you choose to be, not because I'm keeping you. His jaw tightened. I won't have anyone thinking I trapped you. Mara felt something warm spread through her chest. Even now, even agreeing to this for practical reasons, he was thinking about protecting her reputation, her choice. Then we do it right, she agreed. They went to town the following week, riding down the mountain on horses instead of waiting for the supply wagon. It was Mara's first time back since arriving, and the change in her was immediately visible. She sat the horse with confidence now, her body strong and sure, her face weathered by wind and sun. The soft girl who'd climbed onto Jack's wagon 6 months ago was gone. Red Hollow looked smaller than she remembered, the streets narrower, the buildings more cramped. After months of mountain spaces, the town felt suffocating. People stared as they rode through. Whispers followed them like a wake. They went straight to the courthouse, where a clerk with thinning hair and suspicious eyes took their application. You understand this is a legal commitment? He said, looking between them. Not something to enter into lightly. We understand, Caleb said flatly. And Miss Bell, you're doing this of your own free will? No coercion? None, Mara said firmly. The clerk seemed disappointed not to find anything amiss. He processed the paperwork with obvious reluctance, informing them they'd need to wait 3 weeks for the ceremony, time enough for any objections to be raised. Objections? Mara asked. Standard procedure. Allows concerned parties to come forward if there's cause to prevent the marriage. There won't be, Caleb said, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. They left the courthouse and immediately ran into Mrs. Hutchins on the street. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, calculation. Mara, Mr. Thornidge. Her voice was cold. I heard a rumor you were in town. Filing papers, apparently. That's right, Caleb said. Marriage papers. Not a question. Yes. Mrs. Hutchins' mouth thinned. How convenient. The marshal visits, questions are raised, and suddenly you're engaged. Forgive me for being skeptical. Don't care if you're skeptical, Caleb said. We're getting married. That's all that concerns you. What concerns me is that girl's welfare. She came to me desperate and frightened. I wasn't frightened, Mara interrupted. I was poor. There's a difference. Nevertheless, you were under my care, and I have a responsibility at... You had a responsibility to help me find work, which you did. Your responsibility ended there. Mara kept her voice level despite the anger building in her chest. I'm an adult making my own choices. You don't get to question them just because they're not what you'd choose. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Mrs. Hutchins looked at her like she was seeing a stranger, which, in a way, she was. The Mara standing before her bore little resemblance to the timid girl who'd lived in her boarding house. You've changed, Mrs. Hutchins said finally. Yes, I have. They left her standing on the street, her face a mask of disapproval and something that might have been regret. The next stop was more difficult, the general store, where they needed supplies. The moment they entered, conversation stopped. Every eye in the place turned to them. Mara recognized some faces from her boarding house days. Women who'd whispered about her, men who'd looked through her like she didn't exist. Now they were all staring, and she realized with a jolt that she didn't care. Their opinions, which had once felt like judgments from on high, now seemed small and irrelevant. She'd faced down wolves and winter storms. She'd learned to survive on a mountain that killed careless people. What did these folks in their comfortable lives know about real strength? Caleb gave the storekeeper their list and waited while it was filled. The silence was oppressive, everyone listening, no one speaking. Finally, a woman Mara vaguely recognized broke it. Is it true? You're marrying him? Yes. But why? She glanced at Caleb, then away. He's not an easy man. No, he's not, Mara agreed. But he's honest, and he's fair, and he respects the work I do. That's more than I ever got here. You could find someone else, someone better suited. Better suited to what? Someone who'd take care of me? Keep me comfortable? Mara shook her head. I don't want to be taken care of. I want to work, to build something, to matter. Caleb gives me that. The woman looked genuinely confused, like Mara was speaking a foreign language. Maybe she was. Maybe the idea of a woman choosing hardship and partnership over comfort and dependence was foreign to these people. I think you're making a terrible mistake, the woman said finally. You're entitled to your opinion. They collected their supplies and left. Outside, Caleb loaded the horses in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. You didn't have to defend me in there. Yes, I did. We're partners. That means we stand up for each other. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Partners, he repeated like he was testing the word. Yeah, I can live with that. They rode back up the mountain as afternoon light slanted through the trees, and Mara felt lighter than she had in days. The town's judgment meant nothing. Their opinions were noise. What mattered was the work, the land, the man riding beside her who understood what she was choosing and why. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Not for a wedding, neither of them cared about flowers or decorations or any of that, but for what came after. Spring was fighting winter now, which meant flooding, mudslides, unpredictable weather. They worked to secure everything, reinforce weak points, prepare for whatever the mountain threw at them next. Sam came down twice to help with heavy work, and both times Mara caught him watching her and Caleb with an expression she couldn't quite read. Amusement, maybe. Or approval. You two work well together, he said on his second visit. We do, Caleb agreed. That's rare. Most people get in each other's way. But you. He gestured at how they moved around each other, anticipating needs, filling gaps without discussion. You've got rhythm. Comes from practice, Mara said. Comes from giving a damn. Sam packed his tools. You picked a good one, Caleb. I didn't pick her. She showed up. Same thing. Sam mounted his horse. Luck is just opportunity meeting preparation. You were ready for her, even if you didn't know it. After he left, Caleb stood in the yard looking thoughtful. What? Mara asked. Nothing. Just... He shook his head. Sam's smarter than he looks. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April. They rode down the mountain early that morning, both dressed in their best clothes, which weren't much. Caleb in a clean shirt and his only jacket without patches. Mara in a simple dress she'd sewn herself from fabric bought on their last supply run. The courthouse was nearly empty. The clerk who'd married them before was there, looking no happier about it. Sam had agreed to be a witness, along with Jack the wagon driver, who seemed amused by the whole situation. Never thought I'd see you married again, Jack said to Caleb. Makes two of us. Mrs. Hutchins appeared just before the ceremony began, her face set in lines of grim determination. I'm here to object, she announced. The clerk sighed. On what grounds? On the grounds that this marriage is clearly a sham, entered into under duress for the purposes of... It's not a sham, Mara said quietly but firmly. I'm marrying him because I want to. Because he's given me more respect in 6 months than anyone in this town gave me in 23 years. Because we work well together and care about the same things. That's not a sham. That's partnership. You're young and naive. I'm neither. I'm just done pretending that your version of what's proper matters more than what actually works. Mrs. Hutchins looked like she wanted to say more, but the clerk cut her off. Unless you have specific legal grounds for objection, I'm proceeding with the ceremony. She didn't, so he did. The vows were simple, practical. No poetry, no grand declarations. Just the basic legal commitment, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death did them part. When it came time for rings, Caleb pulled out 2 plain bands he'd clearly made himself, hammered from some scrap metal in his workshop. They were rough, imperfect, but they fit. I now pronounce you married, the clerk said without enthusiasm. Caleb looked at Mara, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, acceptance, maybe even relief that they'd done it, made it official, committed to this strange partnership they'd stumbled into. Well, he said finally. That's done. Yeah. Mara found herself smiling. It is. They signed the papers, accepted Sam and Jack's congratulations, and left. Behind them, Mrs. Hutchins stood with her disapproval, but it didn't matter anymore. Legally, officially, Mara was where she chose to be. The ride back up the mountain was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The sun was high and warm, the snow melting in earnest now, water running in rivulets down the rocks. Spring was coming, bringing its own set of challenges. When they reached the ranch, Caleb pulled up his horse and turned to look at her. You know this doesn't have to change anything, right? You can still have your own room, your own space. This was about legality, not... He gestured vaguely. I know, Mara said. And yeah, we'll figure out the details as we go. But Caleb, what? It does change things. Not in a bad way, just now we're committed, officially. There's no backing out if things get hard. Things are always hard up here. You know what I mean. We're stuck with each other now. Something that might have been a smile tugged at his mouth. Could be worse. Could be better too. Yeah, could be. They took care of the horses and fell into their normal routine, evening chores, dinner preparation, the familiar rhythm of ranch life. But there was an undercurrent now, an awareness of each other that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, and they'd just been ignoring it. That night, Mara sat on her bed looking at the ring on her finger. It was rough, unpolished, made by practical hands for practical purposes. She loved it. A knock on her door made her look up. Come in. Caleb entered, looking uncomfortable. Just wanted to check. You doing okay? With all this? I'm fine. You? Fine. He hesitated in the doorway. It's strange, being married again. I thought I'd feel trapped, but I don't. I just feel... What? Less alone. The honesty of it hit her square in the chest. Yeah, me too. He nodded, started to leave, then stopped. Mara, thank you. For choosing this. For choosing me. You chose me too. Not at first. At first I just tolerated you because I had to. But somewhere along the way, he shrugged. You became the best thing on this mountain. Before she could respond, he left, closing the door gently behind him. Mara sat in the darkness, feeling something shift inside her. This marriage might have started as practicality, but it was becoming something else. Something deeper and more complicated, and maybe, possibly, something good. Spring hit with chaotic force. The snow melted faster than the ground could absorb it, turning the ranch into a mud pit. Creeks overflowed their banks. The rain came in sheets, relentless and cold. Everything was wet. Everything was mud. Everything needed constant attention. They worked in conditions that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, but Mara had learned to work through anything. She was stronger now. More capable, her body adapted to the demands of ranch life. Caleb worked beside her, and Mara noticed how they'd developed a shorthand, a glance, a gesture, immediate understanding of what needed doing, the kind of coordination that came from trust and practice and knowing someone well enough to predict their next move. One afternoon, they were reinforcing a weakened section of fence when the ground beneath Caleb gave way. He went down hard into a hidden washout, disappearing from sight with a shout. Mara's heart stopped. She dropped everything and ran, sliding in the mud to reach the edge of the hole. Caleb! I'm okay. His voice came from maybe 8 feet down, tight with pain. Twisted my knee, but I'm okay. Can you climb out? Not easily. Mara assessed the situation quickly. The hole was narrow, steep-sided, slick with mud. She needed rope. Hold on! Don't move! She ran to the barn, grabbed rope and a lantern, and hurried back. Lowering the lantern first so he could see, she then dropped one end of the rope down to him. Tie it around your waist, she called. I'll pull from up here. Mara, you can't... Yes, I can. Just do it. She heard him moving, then felt the rope go taut as he secured it. Bracing herself, digging her heels into the mud, she began to pull. He was heavy, the angle was bad, and the mud made everything twice as difficult. Her shoulders screamed, her hands burned where the rope cut in. But she kept pulling, hand over hand, refusing to let him fall. Slowly, painfully, he climbed while she hauled until finally his hand reached the edge and she could grab his arm, helping pull him over the lip and onto solid ground. They lay there in the mud, both breathing hard, rain hammering down on them. That was stupid, Caleb said finally. I should have been watching where I stepped. Yeah, you should have. Mara was shaking now, adrenaline fading. Scared the hell out of me. You pulled me out, all by yourself. What else was I going to do? Leave you down there? He turned his head to look at her, and even covered in mud, soaked by rain, she could see the emotion in his eyes. 6 months ago, you couldn't lift a hay bale. Now you're pulling full-grown men out of holes. 6 months ago, I didn't have a reason to be strong. Now I do. What reason? You. This place. Us. She sat up, wincing at her sore shoulders. Come on, let's get you inside before your knee swells up worse. He let her help him to the house, leaning on her more than he probably wanted to admit. Inside, she got him settled and examined his knee, swollen and painful, but probably not broken. You'll need to stay off it for a few days, she said, wrapping it carefully. I don't have a few days. There's too much work. Then I'll do it. Mara, I can handle it. You've taught me well enough. And if I can't do something, I'll ask Sam to come help. She met his eyes. You took care of me when I twisted my ankle. Now I take care of you. That's how this works. He looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the grounds. I'm not good at accepting help. I noticed. Get used to it. Over the next week, Mara ran the ranch alone. It was brutal. Twice as much work, no backup, constant decision-making about what could wait and what needed immediate attention. She worked from before dawn until well after dark, falling into bed so exhausted she barely remembered lying down. But she did it. The animals got fed and watered, fences got repaired, problems got solved. When she didn't know how to handle something, she figured it out or went to Sam for advice. The ranch kept running. Caleb watched from the house, increasingly restless as his knee healed, trying to offer guidance that Mara mostly didn't need. She'd learned well, and more than that, she'd developed her own instincts for the work. On the 7th day, when his knee was finally strong enough to walk on, he came out to find her finishing evening chores. She was covered in dirt and probably other things, her hair falling out of its tie, moving with the automatic efficiency of someone too tired to waste motion. You did good, he said. She looked up, surprised to see him. You should still be resting. I'm fine, and I'm serious. You did better than good. The ranch looks better than when I'm running it. That's not true. It is. You're more organized than me, better at planning ahead. He moved closer. This place, it needs you. I need you. Mara felt something flutter in her chest. We need each other. That's the point. Yeah. He reached out and after a moment's hesitation took her hand. His was rough and warm, and holding it felt natural, like something they should have been doing all along. This partnership, it's working. It is. And maybe... He stopped, seeming to wrestle with words. Maybe it could be more than just partnership. Eventually, if you wanted. Mara's heart started beating faster. Are you saying... I'm saying I care about you. More than just as a worker or even a partner. I'm saying that sometime over the past months, this stopped being practical and started being real. He squeezed her hand. I'm saying I don't know what love is supposed to feel like, but respecting someone, enjoying their company, wanting them to be happy. If that's not love, it's damn close. Mara felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same way. I have for a while. I just didn't know if you... I'm not good with feelings. Never have been. But with you, I want to try. She moved closer, and they stood there in the fading light, holding hands, both of them too awkward to know what came next, but willing to figure it out together. We'll take it slow, Mara said finally. Yeah, slow is good. But Caleb, I'm glad I'm here. Glad I married you. Glad this is my life now. Me too. He pulled her into a hug then, and it was clumsy and neither of them quite knew where to put their arms, but it felt right. They stood there as the sun set behind the mountains, two people who'd found each other through necessity and stayed through choice, building something neither had planned but both wanted. Whatever came next, more storms, more challenges, more of the mountain's endless tests, they'd face it together, and that was enough. The weeks following that awkward, honest hug brought a shift that was both obvious and subtle. They were still partners, still worked the same brutal hours, still fell into bed exhausted most nights. But now there were small touches. a hand on a shoulder in passing, fingers brushing when handing off tools, standing closer than strictly necessary when discussing the day's work. Caleb started talking more. Not a lot. He'd never be a chatty man, but he'd share stories about the ranch's early days, his mistakes, the lessons the mountain had beaten into him. Mara learned he'd grown up in a mining town further north, that his father had died in a collapse when he was 12, that he'd spent his youth being told he'd amount to nothing. "Guess I proved them right," he said one evening. "Ended up alone on a mountain nobody wants." "You didn't prove them right," Mara said. "You built something. That's more than most people ever do." "Built something or just ran away? Does it matter? You're here. You made this place work. That counts." He looked at her with an expression she was learning to recognize, gratitude mixed with disbelief that someone actually saw value in what he'd done. "You always know what to say," he said. "No, I don't. I just say what's true." Spring rolled into early summer, bringing new challenges. The garden needed planting, Mara's project, something Caleb had never bothered with but agreed made sense. Why buy vegetables when you could grow them? She worked the soil with determination bordering on obsession, and Caleb caught himself watching her more than once, admiring the set of her jaw when she was focused, the satisfaction on her face when seeds went into neat rows. "You look happy," he observed one afternoon. "I am." She wiped sweat from her forehead. "Never thought I'd like getting my hands dirty, but there's something about making things grow, taking dirt and seeds and water and getting food. Feels like magic." She laughed. "I was going to say proof, but yeah, magic works too." The garden became her sanctuary. In the early mornings before the real work began, she'd walk through it with her coffee, checking on progress, pulling weeds, talking to the plants the way Caleb talked to the horses. He teased her about it at first, but she noticed him doing the same thing when he thought she wasn't watching. "They grow better when you talk to them," she insisted. "That's superstition. Maybe. But my tomatoes are twice the size of yours were last year, so maybe superstition works." He couldn't argue with that. The town kept its distance, which suited them both. Occasionally someone would ride up, supplies, official business, once a traveling preacher who took one look at Caleb's face and decided against delivering whatever sermon he'd planned. But mostly, they were left alone. The isolation that had once felt like punishment now felt like protection. Up here, they could be themselves without judgment, without the constant weight of other people's expectations and opinions. The mountain demanded honesty in a way the town never had. You couldn't pretend up here. The work was too hard, the conditions too brutal for anything but truth. Until June, when Carson came back. This time he brought more men, 6 of them, all armed, riding up the mountain road with the kind of swagger that said they expected cooperation. Mara saw them first and felt ice slide down her spine. "Caleb!" He was at her side in seconds, following her gaze. His whole body went tense. "Get inside," he said quietly. "No." "Mara." "No. We're married now, remember? Your problems are my problems." She grabbed the shotgun from where it leaned against the barn. "Besides, I can shoot now. You made sure of that." He looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have time. The riders were already pulling into the yard. Carson dismounted with theatrical flourish. "Thornidge, and the new Mrs. Thornidge. Congratulations on your marriage. Heard it was quite the ceremony." "What do you want, Carson?" Caleb's voice was flat, dangerous. "Just being neighborly. Wanted to check on you both, make sure everything's going well up here." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Also wanted to discuss a business proposition." "Not interested." "You haven't heard it yet. I'm looking to expand my operation, and this ranch, well, it's right in the middle of some prime grazing land. I'm prepared to make you a generous offer. Very generous." The answer's no. "You're not even going to consider it?" "There's nothing to consider. This land is mine. It's staying mine." Carson's smile faded. "That's disappointing. I was hoping we could handle this civilly." "We are handling it civilly. You made an offer. I declined. Now you leave." "See, that's where it gets complicated." Carson's men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward weapons. "This ranch, it's isolated, dangerous. Things happen up here. Animals get loose, buildings catch fire, people have accidents. Would be a shame if something happened to you. Or your new bride." The threat hung in the air, clear and ugly. Caleb took a step forward, and Mara had never seen him look more dangerous. You threatening my wife? I'm stating facts. Mountains are unpredictable. A woman alone up here, if something happened to you, well, that would be tragic. Mara raised the shotgun, not quite pointing it at anyone, but making its presence known. I'm not afraid of you. Carson looked at her, and his expression turned contemptuous. You should be. Girl like you don't belong up here playing rancher. This isn't some game. This is real life, and in real life, people who don't know their place get hurt. My place is here, next to my husband, on our land. Mara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. And if you threaten us again, you'll find out just how real things can get. One of Carson's men laughed. You gonna shoot us, fat girl? You even know how to use that thing? Before Mara could respond, a rifle shot cracked through the air. Everyone jumped, the horses sidestepped nervously, and one of Carson's men yelped as his hat flew off his head. Sam emerged from the tree line, rifle still raised. She knows how to use it. I made sure of that. Question is, do you want to find out how good her aim is? Carson's face darkened. This doesn't concern you, Sam. It does when you come onto my neighbor's land making threats. Sam moved closer, and two more men emerged behind him, other mountain dwellers Mara had never met. Word travels up here. We heard you were planning something, thought we'd make sure everything stayed friendly. The odds had shifted, and Carson knew it. He was outgunned, outnumbered, and on hostile territory. This isn't over, he said, trying to salvage some authority. Yeah, it is. Caleb's voice cut like steel. You came up here thinking we were isolated, vulnerable, but we're not alone. We've got people who look out for us, same as you've got yours. Difference is, ours won't stand by while you try to intimidate and threaten. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horses and leave. And you're not coming back, not for business, not for visits, not for anything. This land is off limits to you and anyone connected to you. You understand? Carson's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. You're making enemies, Thornidge. I've had enemies before. Still here. Carson and his men left, but the tension didn't ease until they were out of sight. Sam and the other men, he introduced them as Marcus and Dell, both living further up the mountain, stayed for coffee while everyone settled. Appreciate the backup, Caleb said. That's what neighbors do. Sam studied Mara. You handled yourself well. That took guts. I was terrified. So? Brave isn't not being scared. Brave is being scared and doing it anyway. Sam set down his cup. Carson's been pushing boundaries for years, trying to consolidate land, squeeze out the independents. You standing up to him? That matters. Sends a message to everyone else that we don't roll over. Marcus, a younger man with a scarred face, nodded. There's maybe a dozen of us up here, scattered across these mountains. We don't see each other often, but we look out for our own. Carson knows that now. He makes a move against one of us. He makes a move against all of us. I didn't know there were so many people up here, Mara admitted. That's because most of us came up here to get away from people, Dell said with a dry laugh. He was the oldest of the group, maybe 60, with weathered skin and sharp eyes. But there's a difference between wanting to be left alone and actually being alone. We help each other when it counts. After they left, Mara and Caleb sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Her hands were still shaking slightly from adrenaline. That was close, she said. Yeah. You really think he's done? I think he'll try something else eventually. Men like that don't give up easy. But we'll handle it when it comes. He took her hand. Today proves something important, though. We're not isolated. We've got people. That changes the calculation for someone like Carson. Mara thought about that, about community she hadn't known existed, about people choosing to stand together against bullies, about how isolation didn't have to mean loneliness. I never had people who'd stand up for me before, she said quietly. Me neither. Spent most of my life thinking I didn't need anyone. Turns out I was wrong. We both were. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened, and Mara realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just about her and Caleb anymore. They were part of something larger, a network of people who'd chosen this hard life and looked out for each other because of it. The summer brought work that was different from winter's brutality, but no less demanding. Fences needed constant maintenance. The garden needed tending and thrived beyond Mara's expectations, producing more vegetables than they could eat. She started preserving, learning from trial and error how to can and pickle and store food for winter. Animals needed rotating to different pastures. Hay needed cutting and storing. The list never ended, but it was good work, productive work. Mara could see the results of her labor: vegetables growing, fences standing strong, animals thriving. The ranch was functioning better than it ever had, and she knew it wasn't just her contribution. It was what she and Caleb had built together, the synergy of two people who understood each other's strengths and compensated for weaknesses. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Caleb would wake first, start coffee, check on the animals. Mara would handle breakfast while he did morning rounds. They'd work separately or together depending on what needed doing, meeting up for lunch, then back to work until evening. Dinner was often quiet, both too tired for much conversation, but it was comfortable silence. And at night, they'd sit on the porch they'd slowly been repairing and expanding, watching the stars come out, talking about the day, or just existing together. One evening in July, they sat with cold drinks, water mixed with mint from Mara's garden, and watched heat lightning flash in the distance. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said. "Yeah." "Are you happy?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I've ever really thought about happiness. Just survival, getting through the day, making the ranch work. But lately," he paused. "Yeah, I think I am. You?" "Yes, which is strange because this life is harder than anything I imagined. But it's mine, you know? I built it. We built it. That matters more than easy ever could." "It does." He set down his drink and turned to face her fully. "Mara, I need to tell you something. This marriage, I know it started practical, but it's not that anymore. For me, at least. He struggled with the words, his face showing the effort it took. "I love you. I don't know when it happened. Probably somewhere between you pulling me out of that hole and standing up to Carson with a shotgun. Maybe even before that. But it's true. And if you don't feel the same way, that's okay. We can just keep going as we are. But I needed to say it." Mara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You really are terrible with feelings. You know that?" "I know. Sorry." "Don't apologize. I love you too. Have for weeks, maybe longer. I just didn't know if you—" Her voice cracked. "No one's ever said that to me before. Ever. Not even as a kid. No one ever looked at me and thought, I love this person. Then people are idiots." He pulled her close, and this time the embrace wasn't awkward at all. It was exactly what both of them needed. "You're the best thing that's happened to me. This ranch, this life. It's only good because you're in it. I was just existing before. You made it into living." They stayed like that until the stars came out fully, holding each other, feeling the weight of admissions finally made, the relief of honesty shared. That night, things changed again. Mara moved her belongings into Caleb's room, and they shared a bed for the first time as people who'd admitted they loved each other. It was awkward and tender and imperfect, both of them too worn out and inexperienced to make it smooth, but it felt right. This was partnership extending into every aspect of life, two people choosing each other completely. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Caleb's arm around her, Mara felt a completeness she'd never experienced. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but a person, a partnership, a choice you made every day to stay, to work, to build something together. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. When everyone else looked right through me, you saw me. You made it hard not to. You showed up and refused to quit, refused to be less than you were. That's not something you can ignore. Still, thank you." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for showing up in the first place, for staying when you could have left, for choosing this. I'd choose it again, every time." August brought the worst storm of the season. Not snow, that was months away, but wind and rain that turned the mountain into a nightmare of mud and flooding. The creek rose to dangerous levels, threatening to overflow its banks and wash away part of the lower pasture. Trees came down, one narrowly missing the barn. A section of the barn roof tore loose despite all their repairs. They worked in conditions that bordered on suicidal, securing animals, battening down everything that could be battened, trying to prevent catastrophic damage. The rain came down so hard, it felt like being hit with pebbles, The wind tried to knock them over with every gust. Lightning cracked close enough to make their hair stand up. At one point, Mara looked over to see Caleb on the barn roof in sheets of rain, hammering down loose boards while the wind tried to tear him off. "Get down from there!" she screamed over the roar of the storm. "It needs fixing. It needs you alive more than it needs fixing right now. Caleb, please!" He looked at her, rain streaming down his face, and maybe saw the genuine terror in her eyes. He climbed down carefully, and they weathered the rest of the storm from inside, listening to the mountain rage around them, hoping the barn roof would hold, hoping the creek wouldn't overflow, hoping the animals were safe in their shelters. The storm lasted 18 hours. When it finally passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake, they emerged to survey the damage. It was extensive but not catastrophic. The barn roof had held, barely. Several fences were down. Trees blocked paths. The lower pasture was flooded but not washed away. The garden was a mess, plants beaten down by rain and wind, but most of it could be salvaged. "Could have been worse," Caleb said, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. "Could have been better. Always is." He put his arm around her shoulders. "But we're alive. Ranch is still standing. That's what counts." They spent the next 3 weeks on repairs. The work was grueling, made harder by the mud and continued wet weather. Mara's hands, which had toughened so much over the past year, developed new blisters. Her back ached constantly, but she kept going because that's what you did up here. You fixed what broke, you rebuilt what fell down, you kept moving forward. Sam came to help when he heard about the storm damage, and so did Marcus and Dell. The 4 of them working together got through the repairs faster, and Mara learned more about her neighbors in those weeks than she had in all the months before. Sam had been a carpenter before coming to the mountain, which explained his skill with construction. His wife had died in childbirth along with their baby, and he'd left civilization behind because he couldn't stand the pity in people's eyes. Marcus had fought in some war, he wouldn't say which, and come back with scars inside and out. The mountain gave him space to heal without questions. Dell had been a rancher his whole life, and when his sons decided they wanted city jobs instead of following in his footsteps, he'd sold most of his land and moved up here with just enough cattle to keep him busy. "Rather live up here alone than watch my life's work turned into something I don't recognize," he'd said. They were all running from something, Mara realized. Just like her, just like Caleb. The mountain was a refuge for broken people trying to rebuild themselves into something stronger. "We're all damaged goods up here," Sam said one evening over dinner. "That's why we understand each other. Down in town, people pretend everything's fine, hide their cracks under good manners and proper behavior. Up here, there's no point in pretending. The mountain strips all that away. What's left is just the truth of who you are." "And who are we?" Mara asked. "Survivors. People who couldn't fit in the boxes society built for us. So we made our own boxes up here. Better boxes. Honest ones." Mara thought about that long after the men had left. About boxes and fitting in and the freedom that came from building your own life, instead of trying to squeeze into someone else's vision of what your life should be. She'd spent so long trying to fit into the box labeled acceptable woman, quiet, small, decorative, dependent. But she'd never fit, and the trying had nearly destroyed her. Up here there was no box. There was just work and survival and building something real. And somehow, in letting go of trying to fit, she'd found where she actually belonged. By late September, as the first hints of fall colored the mountains, the ranch was not just repaired but improved. They'd reinforced weak points, upgraded systems, made changes that would help them weather future storms better. One afternoon, a rider came up the road. Not Carson or his men, but a lawyer from town, carrying papers in a leather case. Mara's stomach clenched with worry, but the news wasn't what she expected. "Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins has passed away," the lawyer said after refusing coffee. His tone was professional, but not unkind. "She'd been ill for some time. She left a will. And you're mentioned in it, Mrs. Thornidge." "Me?" "Yes. She left you a sum of money, not a fortune, but substantial. About $2,000. She also included a letter." He handed over an envelope yellowed at the edges. "She wrote this some months ago, before her health declined significantly." After the lawyer left, Mara sat on the porch holding the letter, almost afraid to open it. Caleb sat beside her, waiting patiently, not pushing, but present. Finally, she tore it open and read. The letter was 2 pages, written in shaky handwriting that suggested Mrs. Hutchins had been ill for some time. Mara, I was wrong about you. I'm writing this because I need you to know that before I die, and the doctor tells me I don't have much time left. I spent so long seeing you as a burden, as someone who needed saving, that I never saw your strength. When you chose that mountain and that man over the safety I offered, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. I thought you'd come crawling back within weeks, broken and defeated. And I'd have to say, I told you so. But you didn't come back. And when I saw you in town that day, you filed marriage papers. I barely recognized you. You stood differently, spoke differently. You looked people in the eye instead of at the ground. You'd become someone I never imagined you could be. I see now that you were making the only choice that made sense for who you are. You were never meant for a quiet life in town, for the small, safe existence I tried to push you into. You were meant for something harder, something real. You needed to be tested and broken down and rebuilt into the person you were always capable of being. That mountain and that man gave you what I never could, the chance to prove yourself, to discover your own strength. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I made you feel small when you were always bigger than the life I tried to give you. I'm sorry I sent you up there expecting you to fail, because my inability to imagine you succeeding was my failure, not yours. Use this money to build something good. Invest it in that ranch, in your life, in your future. You've earned it 10 times over. You've earned everything you have, and I'm sorry I couldn't tell you that while I was still healthy enough to say it to your face. You were always stronger than anyone gave you credit for. I hope you know that now. Eleanor Hutchins. Mara read it twice, tears streaming down her face. Then she handed it to Caleb, who read it in silence before folding it carefully and giving it back. Well, he said quietly. Yeah. How do you feel? Sad? Relieved? Angry that it took her dying to admit she was wrong? Mara wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. But also grateful? She saw me in the end. She understood. That matters more than I thought it would. It matters because you wanted her to see you. We all want the people who doubted us to admit they were wrong. Did you want that? Yeah. All those people who said I'd never amount to anything, who treated me like I was worthless, part of me still wants to prove them wrong, probably always will. Have you? He looked at the ranch spread out before them, at everything they'd built. Yeah, I have, whether they know it or not. Me too. They sat in silence for a while, processing. Then Caleb spoke again. What do you want to do with the money? Mara thought about it, looking at the ranch with fresh eyes, seeing not just what was, but what could be. I want to invest it in this place. New equipment so we're not constantly fixing broken things. Better stock. I want to improve our cattle bloodlines. Maybe hire seasonal help so we're not killing ourselves every winter. Build a proper bunkhouse so we have space for workers. Make this place truly sustainable, so we're not just surviving but thriving. You sure? That money's yours. You could do anything with it. Buy yourself nice things, save it for emergencies, even start your own business in town if you wanted. Could what? Buy a house in town? Start over somewhere else? She shook her head firmly. This is my home, Caleb. This ranch, this mountain, you. I'm not going anywhere. Every penny goes into making this place better. He pulled her close and kissed her, and Mara felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she belonged. They spent the fall planning how to use the money wisely. Caleb was conservative, wanting to save most of it for emergencies. Mara was more aggressive, arguing that strategic investments now would prevent future emergencies. They compromised, as they'd learned to do, some for improvements, some for savings. They ordered new tools, better equipment. They bought breeding stock from a rancher 2 territories over who was known for quality. They started construction on a proper bunkhouse, working on it themselves to save money, with help from Sam and the others on weekends. The ranch transformed. Not overnight, but gradually, like Mara herself had transformed. Getting stronger, more capable, more efficient. Winter came again, their second together, and this time they were ready. Better prepared, better equipped, better able to handle what the mountain threw at them. The work was still brutal, but they'd learned the rhythm, developed the endurance, built the systems that made survival not just possible, but manageable. They hired a young man named Peter to help with heavy work, a kid from town who'd gotten into trouble. Nothing serious, but enough that his parents wanted him away from bad influences. He was 17, scrawny, with scared eyes that reminded Mara painfully of her younger self. I don't know anything about ranching, he admitted on his first day, his voice shaking. That's fine. Neither did I when I started. Mara handed him a shovel. You'll learn. The mountain's a good teacher. She taught him what Caleb had taught her, but with more patience, more explanation. She remembered how hard those first weeks had been, how every task seemed impossible, how she'd felt stupid and inadequate. She made sure Peter didn't feel that way. Caleb watched her work with the kid and smiled. You're good with him. I remember what it's like. Being the one everyone dismissed, everyone expected to fail. He needs someone to believe he can do it. You teach him better than I taught you. Your method worked, but it wasn't kind. This is better. Yeah, Caleb agreed. It is. You're improving on everything I built, making it better. Peter struggled at first. Of course he did. Everyone did. But he stuck with it. Slowly, Mara watched him transform the way she had. Saw him stand straighter, speak more confidently, develop calluses and muscle, and the quiet pride that came from hard work. Well done. Thank you, he said one evening after finishing a particularly difficult task, for giving me a chance, for believing I could do this when nobody else did. You're doing the work, Mara said. I'm just showing you how. The strength was always yours. She thought about Mrs. Hutchins' letter, about how the old woman had finally seen Mara's strength. Now Mara was learning to see it in others, to recognize potential where people only saw problems. Maybe that's what this mountain did. It stripped away all the pretense and social niceties and revealed the truth underneath. Sometimes that truth was ugly. People broke up here, failed, gave up. But sometimes the truth was beautiful. Sometimes it showed you that the person everyone dismissed was actually the strongest one of all. One December evening, almost exactly a year since they'd married, Mara stood in the yard looking up at the mountains. Snow was falling softly, the world quiet and clean. The bunkhouse was finished, Peter inside probably reading by lamplight. Smoke rose from the main house chimney. The animals were bedded down safe and warm. Everything was peaceful. Everything was right. Caleb came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. What are you thinking about? About how much has changed. 2 years ago, I was the girl they sent up here expecting me to fail. Now you're the reason this ranch succeeds, you and your ideas and your hard work. We're the reason, both of us, and Sam and Peter and everyone who helped us. Yeah. He pulled her closer. You know what I realized the other day? I stopped thinking of this as my ranch. It's our ranch now. Everything we've built, every decision we make, it's ours together. Mara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. Good, because I'm not going anywhere, ever. Neither am I. They stood there as snow fell around them, two people who'd found each other through desperation and stayed through choice, who'd built something real out of harsh conditions and harder work. Inside, Mara felt something shift, a flutter in her belly that made her catch her breath. She'd suspected for a few weeks now, but hadn't been sure. Now she was. Caleb, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. He looked at her, concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, disbelief, fear, and then pure unfiltered joy that made him look years younger. He couldn't seem to finish a sentence. We're having a baby. I'm about 3 months along, I think, maybe 4. Mara. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes shining. I don't even have words. This is everything. It won't be easy. A baby up here with all the work. Nothing up here is easy. But it's worth it. You're worth it. This baby is worth it. He kissed her softly. We're going to be parents. Yeah, we are. You think we can do it? I think if we can run this ranch, survive winters, stand up to men like Carson, we can handle a baby. It'll be the hardest thing we've done, but we'll do it together. Always together. That night they lay in bed talking about the future in a way they never had before. Names they liked. How they'd manage the work. Whether it was a boy or girl. Making plans and promises and building dreams on top of the foundation they'd already laid. The town had stopped talking about them mostly. The scandal had faded, replaced by newer gossip. Occasionally someone would mention the Thornidge ranch, how it was thriving now. How that girl everyone dismissed had somehow made it work. How she'd taken money from Mrs. Hutchins and turned the failing ranch into one of the most successful operations in the region. But Mara didn't care what the town thought anymore. Their opinions had lost all power over her the moment she'd chosen her own path and stuck with it. They were background noise, irrelevant to the life she'd built. Winter progressed with its usual brutality, but Mara worked through her pregnancy with the same determination she'd brought to everything else. She slowed down when she needed to, let Caleb and Peter handle the heaviest work, but she refused to be sidelined. This was her ranch. She'd earned her place here through sweat and blood and stubborn refusal to quit. Pregnancy wasn't going to change that. "You should rest more," Caleb worried. "I rest plenty. I'm pregnant, not broken." "I know, but nothing. I know my limits. I'll ask for help when I need it. Until then, I'm working." He learned to accept it, though he watched her like a hawk, ready to step in if she pushed too hard. Mara found it touching and annoying in equal measure, but she understood it came from love, from fear of losing her, from the same protectiveness that made him defend her against Carson. The baby came in late May, a daughter they named Sarah after Caleb's mother. The labor was long and hard. Sam's wife helped with the birth, a quiet woman named Helen who Mara hadn't known existed but who appeared with supplies and competence when needed. When Mara finally held her daughter, looking at that tiny red face, feeling that small weight in her arms, something inside her crystallized. This was what she'd been building toward. Not just a ranch, not just a marriage, but a family, a life, something real and lasting. "She's perfect," Caleb whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "She's wrinkled and angry," Mara corrected, but she was smiling. "She's perfect." Sarah was small and fierce and screamed louder than seemed possible for such a tiny thing. She demanded everything: time, energy, attention, and gave back nothing but dirty diapers and sleepless nights. Mara loved her ferociously. She learned to work with a baby strapped to her back, to nurse between chores, to function on even less sleep than she'd thought possible. It was impossibly hard, but looking at Sarah's face, feeling Caleb's hand on her shoulder as they stood over the cradle together, she couldn't imagine any other life. Peter proved himself invaluable during those early months, taking on extra work without complaint, giving Mara space to recover and adjust to motherhood. "You gave me a chance when I needed it," he said simply. "Now I'm returning the favor." Sam and the others stopped by more frequently, bringing supplies, offering help, creating a support network that made the isolated ranch feel less lonely. Helen taught Mara tricks for soothing a fussy baby, for getting more sleep, for surviving those first brutal months. The mountain community, small as it was, rallied around them. Because that's what you did up here. You looked after your own. One summer evening when Sarah was 3 months old, Mara sat on the porch, now properly rebuilt and expanded with railings and a roof that didn't leak, while Sarah dozed in her arms. Caleb sat beside her, Peter was in the bunkhouse, and the ranch hummed with quiet evening sounds. "You ever regret it?" Caleb asked quietly. "Choosing this life? It's even harder now with Sarah." "Not once. Not even when I'm so tired I can barely stand, when Sarah's been screaming for hours, when everything hurts and I can't remember what sleep feels like." Mara looked at her daughter's peaceful face. "This is hard, but it's real. It's mine. Ours. We built this." "We did." He squeezed her hand. "I spent so long thinking strength meant being alone, not needing anyone. But real strength is building something with someone, letting yourself need them and be needed. You taught me that. We taught each other a lot of things." "Yeah, we did." Mara watched Sarah sleep and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the boarding house where she'd been nothing, to that first terrifying day on the mountain, to now. A wife, a mother, a rancher, someone who mattered. She'd been the girl they sent to fail, the burden, the joke. Now she was building something that would outlast all the people who'd dismissed her. The months turned into a year, then 2. Sarah grew from a screaming infant into a toddler who explored everything with fearless curiosity. She took her first steps in the barn, chasing after a cat. She learned to talk in full sentences by 18 months, chattering constantly about the horses and the mountains and everything she saw. Peter stayed on permanently, proving himself not just capable, but essential. He was family now, the younger brother Mara had never had, learning not just ranching but life from their example. The ranch continued to thrive. With strategic investments and careful planning, it became known throughout the region for quality stock and reliable operation. People started coming to them for advice, for breeding stock, for help with their own struggling operations. Mara became something of a legend, the woman who'd come to the mountain with nothing and built an empire. People told stories about her in town, embellishing and exaggerating until the real story was buried under mythology. But Mara didn't care about the stories. She cared about the work, the land, the family she'd built. One autumn afternoon when Sarah was 3, Mara took her up to a high ridge where you could see the whole valley spread out below. It was the same ridge where Caleb had taken Mara during her first year, showing her the boundaries of their land. "This is ours," Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "This is ours," Mara confirmed. "Your father and I built this. Someday, it'll be yours. Will you teach me? Like you teach Peter? I'll teach you everything I know, but you have to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll never let anyone tell you what you can't do. People will try. They'll say you're too small, too young, too girl. But you're a mountain girl. You're strong. You can do anything you set your mind to." Sarah nodded seriously, absorbing this lesson. "Like how you can do everything Daddy can do." Exactly like that. They sat on the ridge watching clouds move across the valley, and Mara felt peace settle over her. This was what she'd been building. Not just a ranch, but a legacy. A lesson that strength came in forms people didn't expect. That the ones you dismissed were often the ones you should have feared. Years passed. The ranch expanded. They hired more seasonal workers, built more structures, improved operations year after year. Sarah grew into a capable, confident child who could ride before she could read, who knew the land as intimately as her parents did. Caleb's hair started showing gray, and lines appeared around his eyes from years of squinting into sun and wind. But he'd softened in ways that mattered, learning to laugh more, worry less, trust that the foundation they'd built was strong enough to weather anything. Mara's body carried the marks of hard living, scars from injuries, calluses that never quite went away, muscles built from endless work. But she'd never been healthier, stronger, more certain of who she was and where she belonged. One evening, Sarah was 7 now, reading by the fire while rain drummed on the roof. Caleb pulled out a box Mara had never seen before. "What's that?" "Something I've been saving. Seemed like the right time." He opened it to reveal papers, documents, deeds. "This is the ranch, legally. Everything we've built. I had a lawyer draw these up. It's in both our names now, officially. Equal partners in everything." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. "Caleb, you've earned it 10 times over. More than earned it. This place works because of you. Your ideas, your work, your heart. It should be yours legally as much as it is in reality." "It already was ours." "I know, but I wanted it official. Wanted Sarah to see that her mother built this place same as her father. That women can own land, run operations, build empires." He took her hand. "Wanted you to know, beyond any doubt, that this is your home, your place, that nobody can ever take it from you." Mara couldn't speak. She just pulled him close and held on, overwhelmed by the gift he'd given her. Not just the legal papers, but the recognition they represented. The acknowledgement that she wasn't just his helper or partner, but an equal owner of everything they'd created. Sarah looked up from her book. "Mama's crying." "Happy tears, baby. Very happy tears." That night, after Sarah was in bed, Mara and Caleb sat on their porch looking at the mountains silhouetted against the star-filled sky. "I never thanked you," Mara said. "For what?" "For giving me a chance. For seeing something in me when nobody else did. For teaching me to be strong." "I didn't teach you that. You already were strong. I just gave you the space to prove it." Still nothing. "You saved me as much as I saved you, maybe more. I was turning into stone up here, hard and cold and alone. You reminded me what it meant to be human, to care about someone, to build something that matters." He kissed her temple. "We saved each other. That's how partnership works." Mara thought about that. About 2 broken people finding each other and building something whole. About how the weakest person in the room could become the strongest given the right conditions. About how the girl everyone dismissed had become the woman nobody dared underestimate. The town had sent her expecting failure. Instead, She'd found everything that mattered: purpose, partnership, love, family. She'd found home. Years later, long after the ranch had become legendary, after Sarah had grown and started building her own life, after Caleb's hair had gone fully gray and Mara's hands were gnarled from decades of work, people would still tell stories about the Thornidge Ranch, about the woman who'd come to the mountain with nothing and built an empire, about the man who'd been too hard and angry until the right person softened him, about the partnership that proved love could be built from practical foundations and grow into something unbreakable. But they never understood the real story. They never understood that it wasn't about one person being strong or another being saved. It was about two people choosing each other, day after hard day, building something real brick by brick, year by year. It was about becoming who you were meant to be, even when no one believed you could. Mara understood that now. Understood it bone deep in a way only lived experience could teach. And every morning when she woke beside Caleb, every time she looked out at the ranch they'd built together, every moment she watched Sarah carry on their legacy, she knew the truth. She hadn't just survived being sent to fail. She'd done something better. She'd chosen to succeed on her own terms, in her own way, building a life that no one else could have imagined for her. And that refusal to accept other people's limitations, that determination to prove her own worth, that choice to build rather than break, made all the difference. The mountain had tested her. She'd passed every test. The town had dismissed her. She'd built something they couldn't ignore. The world had told her she wasn't enough. She'd proven them all wrong. And in the end, standing on her porch looking at the empire she'd built from nothing but stubborn will and hard work, Maribel Thornidge knew she'd never been the girl they thought she was. She'd always been the woman she became, strong, capable, unbreakable, and finally, completely home.